Turn by McKenna! Lovely cushion header. And Gerrard! You beauty! What a head, son! What a head!
Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Trio. I'm really excited to be joined today by Kaus. How are you doing today, mate?
Thanks, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. Kaus is a football writer. He featured on Calcio Mercato, Football Italia, Manchester Evening News and The Times. So he's someone who's very well connected, and I'm really excited today to be talking about transfers because it's now silly season, and as you guys all know, as Man United fans and other football fans, it's really just clickbait, isn't it? So I really just want to sort of cut right through all that sort of rubbish and get right down to the nitty gritty and to the truth, really. So are you excited about the game today against Bournemouth?
Yeah, pretty much. I thought the rumors that came in about Bruno and Pogba being injured, I thought that was pretty trash. I mean, I don't really know whether they got all of that stuff from, but yeah, I think we'll probably win that.
It's just, it's always a case, isn't it, though, with Man United, they just sell newspapers. So if you put United's name, for example, I remember a few years ago with Sergio Ramos, they put his name in, and we all got excited because Sergio Ramos is for me, one of the greatest centre-backs of all time. Yeah. And then next thing you know, he signed a new contract. So, I mean, you work in the football writing world. Is it a case that some newspapers just put in Man United's name just to get more clicks?
Yeah, it's true, and I think I should be accused of that as well because everyone does that at some point. I mean, if you write about United, it's probably just if you write a plain headline for that, say you don't hide anything up, you just say Bruno Fernandes is doing this, then you probably won't get views. But if you hide that thing up, you'll probably get about 2,000 or 3,000 views more. So I think that's one downside of how United operate, but you can't really avoid that if you are a mega club, and you have been a mega club since 1992 when the stock exchange stuff happened. I think that's bound to happen.
Absolutely, but I think this is something that the owners want, because you can't exactly say that Man United's owners are particularly interested in success on the pitch. I think you look over the last few years, when we've got into the top four, they haven't invested when we've needed to push forward to get the trophy, because for them, coming first and coming fourth isn't exactly much of a monetary difference. So do you think that the owners, they love the fact that United are getting their name, they're getting clicks, and they're getting millions and millions of retweets on Twitter, because at the end of the day, that improves the exposure around the world?
Yeah, it's probably true for many other clubs, I think, because that's how Barcelona operate. I know Barcelona are probably a worse run club than Man United these days, but that's how things work. And the Glazers are people who don't really bother about success on the pitch as often as they do now, maybe under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But you look at their past records in other sports, I think they did sign a big, what's he called? Is he Tom Brady or someone? I don't really follow their sport. They signed him, but
in the NFL.
Yeah. But they are not really a good team on the pitch. So I think the main reason it is to get on, make sure that they get a lot of reaction on Twitter, and that's how things work for other clubs as well. Not for Bundesliga clubs, but for super clubs, that's how it works. But that's pretty unavoidable these days.
It's a massive shame, but we might as well just jump straight into it, because I think it leads us nicely to Jadon Sancho, and I just can see this being a saga through the whole of the summer, and it seems to be the case consistently with Man United. You know, with the high-profile transfers or their targets, it's just it's a bit of a circus, to be honest. You know, you hear stories left, right, and centre, and you know, you saw the reports earlier on in the week of 50 million sort of a price range which United are refusing to pay over, which is absolute rubbish. And in my opinion, that was a negotiation ploy. But it seems to me that United are the only team interested in him, and he's very interested in joining United. The reports yesterday that came out saying that he'd agreed in principle a 5-year deal with a contract, including bonuses, of around £200,000 a week. And it seems that the way United are playing it, they're playing it very cool. They don't want to be shafted in terms of the price, because in the past we've overpaid for players such as Lukaku and Di Maria. So it seems that personal terms are not the issue. I mean, if you look at some of the really well-known, let's say Fabrizio Romano, he has said that personal terms are not an issue, and he's as reliable as it gets. It just seems that all that's left is United and Dortmund to agree on that fee. So what is your thoughts, and can you give us a bit of an insight on what's going on behind the scenes during this pursuit for Jadon Sancho?
I think, as you just mentioned, this saga is probably going to be the most stretched out saga of the summer in terms of how long things are going to take, because I think this will keep dragging on for a lot of weeks, as people expected for someone like Matthijs de Ligt maybe last summer. I mean, it wasn't as stretched out as Sancho would be, but it was still pretty tiring. There was a point at which I literally just stopped caring about where he's going to go, because in this case we're looking at two parties which have pretty valid reasons to negotiate for, because Dortmund are right to value the player at over, say, 100 million, around 120 million, because to me Jadon Sancho is a generational talent, and he's, even at this age, he's one of the best in the world in his position or even in general. So Dortmund are well within their rights to demand a fee of whatever they want. And on the other hand, United have now become hard negotiators in the market. And it's really unlike those Di Maria days or those Radamel Falcao days. They've been using this, say, a ploy of backing away from transfer deals, or briefing it to the media that they're backing away from this deal, just to make sure that the selling party makes sure that they reduce their asking price. I think this happened for Bruno Fernandes, Van der Sar, and even for Harry Maguire. And for Harry Maguire, the thing was they did this thing for about a whole year. So you won't really be surprised if this drags on for quite a long time. Like, United have been, especially over the last, say, 2 weeks, they've been pretty active when it comes to briefing the English media about what their financial situation is like, along with that 50 million stuff, which was ridiculous. And the fact that we've reached these briefing stages shows that we're probably, say, some weeks away from the clubs holding official talks, and I think that's how it works for most of the deals these days. But Dortmund themselves, interestingly, have been briefing stuff to the German media, but curiously, they've only given signs of how they need money. I mean, I think 2 or 3 briefs that came out from the German side, it was that they don't really have enough money to afford Jude Bellingham. So that's a big sign that they actually need money. And there was another brief that said that they need about 40 million or something to balance their finances this summer. So it says a lot about how they are pretending to be hard negotiators, which on paper they really are, but they're just throwing these subtle hints of how they aren't as snide as they think they are.
Yeah.
So there are limitations there for Dortmund, and in the end I do expect Sancho to join United. And I think for the deal to happen, I think there's 2 possibilities. First, United offer cash plus maybe a player or 2, and I think it's interesting that they talked about a 50 million thing, because if United actually do offer 50 million, it could be possible that they offer maybe 2 players plus that 50 million to make sure that that valuation reaches 90 million. I don't know who those players can be.
Do you have an idea on who they could be?
Because I was told, I think this was 3 or 4 months ago, that Pereira is not willing to leave at this point. Because Lingard, as soon as he joined Mino Raiola's stable, that's a clear sign that he wants to leave. He could be the one that leaves, and it's pretty clear that he needs to move on. His time at United is done. No disrespect in that, but I think he really suits the way Dortmund play as well, tactically. So I think he could be one. And I'm not really sure about what Dortmund would want from United, because the way their transfer policy works, it isn't like they usually sign players of over the age of maybe 25 or 26. So that's one thing which can be a drawback in this, but I still think United can afford to pay the whole amount for Dortmund, no matter how hard they play. I think it will come down to the same fee that we paid for Pogba and back in 2016, around the 90 million fee. So I think that's what's going to happen. And I pretty much expect Sancho to join United.
I completely agree. And something I do want to say is that those saying that United don't need, let's say, Sancho now that Greenwood's emerged, and Greenwood's a phenomenal talent, but something that I've been saying consistently, and he's been so good recently, but the problem is that he's only 18 years old. And whilst he is, like you said, Sancho's generational talent, I think Greenwood is up there as well. I think the issue is that you can't expect an 18-year-old to play consistently for a whole season and not have dips in form. And as soon as he has dips in form, we've seen from our fan base that they will get on his back. They did it with Rashford before he went on a fantastic run early on in the season. They've done it with Martial. Like, what's to say that they won't do this with Mason Greenwood? And I think also those who are saying we don't need another midfielder, they're the same people that are going to complain about the lack of depth. And something that we all saw against Norwich was, and that's a perfect example. Beyond Pogba and Bruno in midfield, there's absolutely nothing. You're relying on Pereira and Lingard, who both are just not good enough even for the bench for Man United. And forget about competing on all four fronts. We would struggle to compete if injuries hit, maybe on 2 or 3 fronts. So what's your thoughts on that? Because people are now saying, oh, Sancho, we don't need him anymore. But then after Sancho is Dan James. And for me, Dan James is not good enough to start, and you cannot rely on him. And United are in a really crucial stage. They're developing well under Oli after a few hiccups. I mean, I was one that had doubts over him. But now that they're progressing, you have to sign, because Liverpool showed when they were progressing, they brought in 2 world-class goalkeeper and a centre-back, and it took them to another level. And I think Sancho is that player that can take United to another level where our attack will finally be balanced, because for years we haven't had the right winger.
Yeah. When Liverpool were without guys like Fabinho or Virgil van Dijk or Alisson, there was this game against Spurs in which they lost 4-1, and I think that was that, I think if you can call that a turning point or whatever, I think that was when they realized that they really need to get in specialist players for those positions, and that's what United really need to do right now. And Sancho is someone who's a proper right winger, even though he can play on the left. I think he's that proper specialist right wing player that United need. And what United needs is someone who doesn't essentially cut inside like Mason Greenwood would always do, because that's what he usually does. Sancho is someone who can hug the touchline. He can cut inside. He can come inside, and he can even play as a second striker, like he's showed for Dortmund a lot of times. Because the way Dortmund play is, I remember tweeting this during the Brighton game, and that we were constantly switching to a 3-4-3 shape when we were in possession. And that 3-4-3 shape was a lot like Dortmund play. The front three are really narrow inside in the final third. And that's how Dortmund like to play with Sancho. Although he is close to the touchline a lot of times, he has the license to come narrow. And as soon as Dortmund have the ball, they switch to that 3-4-3 shape. And that's how Sancho thrives. And I think that's why we really need Sancho. And you talked about Daniel James. I think the very purpose of signing him was to make sure that he plays the role of, say, if we compare him to how Liverpool are doing, I think we can compare him to maybe Xherdan Shaqiri or Divock Origi. He's just that sort of player who gives us something different in the sense that he's just that moments player. He can come up with those moments of brilliance in which he can win us games which are really, really tight. He's done that early in the season. I know it was just a small spell, but there's a lot of times when Daniel James gets into the right positions, but he doesn't really have that intelligence to take the next step, whether he wants to dribble the ball, whether he wants to pass the ball inside, whether he wants to move outside, stand there, and then play someone else in. He doesn't really have that smartness about him, and I think that will be coached into him as time goes on. And I think Greenwood's future is probably as a striker, even though he's really good on the right. He's probably the sort of that attack. The striker who sometimes drops deep, who sometimes comes deeper and then dribbles the ball into the final third. I think that's the sort of striker that we want Martial to be, but he sometimes just sort of. I mean, I know this Martial FC will be pretty angry at this, but he sometimes just sort of looks as if he just wants the ball to be played at his feet. He does not really want to drop back.
My
That's
my
what.
fear on Martial is, you make a great point there, and I agree about the Martial FC. He's supremely talented. He's an excellent finisher, but to be a top number 9 for Man United, his movement needs to be better. And he's come back. He's scored a fantastic hat trick, but you do have these doubts whether one, he has got a bit of an injury record. It's not
Yeah.
exactly great, and I don't think he can stay fit for a whole season. Which is why the signing of Sancho would help, because if Martial is injured, you've got Igalo, who I don't think is probably good enough to start for an extended period. But then you can shift Greenwood inside and he can play more centrally. But that's my only thing with Martial, is that I've never had doubts about his finishing. It's the question is his movement good enough to be leading the line of Man United? So that still remains to be seen. But he has come back good, I would agree.
Yeah, I think the purpose of how United plays to make sure that they have a very fluid front four, and to do that you need to have, I think, 6 or 7 players who can either play on the left, either play as a second striker, and maybe even play as a striker. And I think United currently have, what, I think 4 players of that type. They've got Rashford, they've got Greenwood, they've got James, and then they've got Martial. I think they need Sancho as well in there, because that's if you go back to how we played against Cardiff in Solskjaer's first game, that's exactly how he wants us to play. He wants the left winger to sometimes move towards the right. The attacking midfielder can be found on the right wing. It's a really, say, a fluid shape that he wants us to play. And I think the players that we're being linked with, be it Donny van de Beek as well, that we'll probably talk about later on, and Jack Grealish, all of these are players who will probably thrive in a system which has that free flowing intention. And I think we're on the right track in that regard by going after Sancho and Grealish and all these guys.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic answer. So, what's your rating out of 5 on the likelihood of Sancho signing? I'm going to put my neck out and say 4.5 out of 5. From what I've read, from the conversation with you, from conversation with a few other people, that it is really about agreeing a fee with Dortmund and then trying to get it closed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think I'll probably rate it to 4, because it's not like if he stays at Dortmund, it'll be a bad thing. Like, if Dortmund are still a big club, and even though they're not a powerhouse club like maybe Real Madrid or United or Bayern Munich, but staying there is not a bad thing at all. And I think that's why I say, if nothing really happens on that front, if we fail to agree a fee, Sancho can still stay there like he did last summer. So I think that's why I say it's probably a 4. But I'm still pretty confident that we'll probably get him.
Brilliant. And this brings us nicely onto Van der Beek, and it seems to have gone a little bit quiet on this front. I believe that rumours did emerge of a 45 million euro fee, and it seems that Real, who were looking to sign him last summer, actually pulled out and have pulled out this summer, and he seems to be open to a move to Man United. And like you said, he offers that sort of tactical flexibility. I think he's one of those midfielders, and that's why maybe I'm more inclined towards him than Grealish. And we'll go on to Grealish later, but what I like is that he can actually play further forward, so he could rotate with Bruno. And the thing for me, though, is actually Van der Beek's good enough to start for Man United. He's that high of a player. I mean, I think when you look at the way that Ajax played when they got to the final of the semi-final of the Champions League last season, I do believe that actually he was more of a stand-up player than Frankie de Jong. De Jong got moved, but Van der Beek, for me, was the one pulling all the strings.
Yeah.
And so when I'm looking at Van der Beek, and for the fee that's been commanded in comparison to Grealish, who's going to look, if Villa get relegated, that might change, but it seems to be better value for money. He's played in the Champions League, he's played at a higher level, he's more proven. But it seems that Real have pulled out, and we have, in essence, maybe a free run at him. Van der Sar and Woodward are in contact. So would you be able to talk to me a little bit more about him, what you think of him as a player, and whether there is a likelihood that Man United will also add him to Sancho in the summer? Because I have my doubts that beyond 2 signings, I don't think United will pull off more, and that's the problem with this board, I think. And even getting these 2 in, I think, will be a bit of a struggle. But it's a must.
Yeah, I think, it is a must. I think I agree with you when you say that he probably suits us more than Grealish does, because I think he's played as a number 8 as well, and that's important to note, because he is a lot like the way Lingard plays in many ways, because I think he is an upgrade on Lingard, And it's a weird one because I know for a fact that United are looking for a player of the attacking midfield position, but someone who can play on the left, on the right, and then a bit deeper as well. As I said, for that flexibility once again. And I was also told that James Maddison was open to a Man United move. I think this was about 7 or 8 months ago. He was looking to move to Man United, but we're clearly not interested in him now, even though he might be on the short list, but he's
I
not
really
really
like
a
him.
top right. Yeah,
I think he's an interesting player.
I mean, he's sort of been a bit of a disappointment in 2020, but that's a completely different issue. That's Leicester's own issue. But Van de Beek is an interesting one because I feel he suits United more than Madison or Grealish. He's been on the short list for many months now, even before that Champions League spell that Ajax had last season. And I think not just United, I think Spurs and Dortmund were also looking at him before last season, and he was close to a Real Madrid move, and everything was pretty much agreed. And I think Eric Ten Hag even confirmed that he was moving on to Real Madrid, and Gianluca Di Marzio reported the same thing. But more recently, Ten Hag has said that Nicolas Tagliafico and Van de Beek are likely to be sold. But here's what I think I'm happening here: that the interest from United is there, but it isn't like he's a massive priority at this point. And they can't. It's not like we can't really live without him, without signing him, and that has been the case for many months now. But the thing with Ajax is that they are clearly very desperate to sell, and Tagliafico as well, because it's pretty similar the situation of both of them. And Ajax are not really a club who believe in manipulating the media as much as, say, Sporting Lisbon did for us with the Bruno stuff whenever that happened, that the weird saga. And they
Yeah.
aren't really a club to do that unless there's Mino Raiola involved. There's Raiola involved, and they did that when with the Delete thing and the Justin Kluivert thing as well. But the pandemic has sort of forced them into doing things that they don't always do. They want the money that Van de Beek sale will get them. They want someone to take Van de Beek from them as much as possible and give them that money. It could be Real Madrid, it could be United or anyone else. But I think the reports that initially came in from the Netherlands, which they called pretty reliable, I think there was some sort of truth in that, but it was partially true. A part of it wasn't really true, or a part of it was the stuff about that United have made contact for him. That's probably a rehash from some older times just to make sure that someone just comes in and buys him off from Ajax.
Yeah, I think it's to be honest, I have pretty low hopes on it now. Now that it's gone a little bit quiet. I mean, I'd like to think maybe because United don't seem to be able to to handle more than one transfer at the time, which is quite crazy, for a club that size. But I'd like to think that if they could get Sancho through the door fairly early, that their next priority has to be a midfielder. And I just want to ask you a question because I think his best position is number 8 as well. I think what he does really well is he has the ability to break the line. He's got very good range of passing. And if you look at the front three we've got and with the movement there, I mean, they would have a field day with someone with his vision. But clearly, Nemanja Matic is Man United's number 1 defensive midfielder. I mean, he's had an incredible turnaround. He looks like he's got better. And I think what people don't realise actually is how good technically Matic is. And an example of that would be the pass he did for the incredible counter-attacking goal. Not many defensive midfielders in the league can pull that off. I mean, I'd say, maybe Fabinho could, Rodri could, but you look at the likes of Ndidi, I think he'd struggle, and I'm a big Ndidi fan. So, looking at the defensive midfielder position, this is a curveball, and I know that this may not work, but Oli clearly wants his defensive midfielder to be able to play with the ball, hence the links with Declan Rice, who I've never been a big fan of, but to his credit, he was phenomenal against Chelsea. And I'm starting to get converted that he might be a good replacement for Matic because there's definitely similarities there. But Rice has that recovery pace, which is very important in the Premier League. So could you see that maybe Van der Beek be brought into play in that defensive deep line playmaker position? Because, he'd be quite nice picking the ball off the centre-backs and just spraying passes, and you would think that it'd actually make it quite difficult for other teams to even get a touch on the ball if you've got a midfield of Bruno, Pogba and Van der Beek.
I think he's never really played at that defensive midfield role, even though Ajax play a similar sort of system that United would want to play under Solskjaer. But he's not really got that physical element to him. He's a bit like a more technical and a smarter and a quicker version of Jesse Lingard. He just offers something that United don't really have right now. He's got that unpredictable nature in him. He's a really hard worker. I mean, that's why he just reminds me of Lingard from that 2017-18 season. And I think if we want a defensive midfield, I think you just mentioned Declan Rice. I think he'd be a really good signing for us. Apart from that, I think, as I've said, we really want us to play a bit like RB Leipzig do. There should be tactical flexibility. There should be players moving about freely. There should be a change of systems between, I mean, in just split seconds, they should change systems and tactics. That's what RB Leipzig really do. And I think that's why we really should look at Konrad Laimer as well. I think he knows how to win the ball back. He knows how to press high up the pitch. He is really good on the ball as well. Apart from him, maybe Thomas Partey as well. But the thing I do have some reservations about Partey, and that's because he plays in a completely different system. He plays in a deeper position. I know he's really complete midfielder, but I don't really know if he would be as comfortable playing in a system like ours or in a system like maybe Man City's.
But even Arsenal are a ball-playing team, and Arteta expects his team to be moving around. And I would say when you look at this is, I guess, a shame when I look at Atletico's team. I think I love Simeone. I think what he does incredibly well. I would never want him near United. I honestly wouldn't, because it's just boring football. For me, boring football doesn't mean the way they beat Liverpool was actually quite phenomenal and entertaining because it was Liverpool. But I just find that with Thomas Partey, I think he would be a step in a different direction. I mean, he, like you say, he's a complete midfielder. For me, he's more in the mold of, let's say, a Kante, which is incredible. He would offer more legs and an engine midfield. But I think that Limer's an interesting one. And has there been any sort of interest in?
I don't think there's anything in him yet. I think any interest in him yet. But I think there could be, because the sort of player he is and the way he's performed in the Champions League level this season, he was brilliant against Spurs in London, I think, and even in Leipzig. I think there could be interest in him, but I think Leipzig could be done with their sales at this point after selling Timo Werner, because they offer Champions League football for next season. They're just this attractive, glowing project that can really improve even at this point. I think a player like Konrad Laimer just suits their system probably more than anyone else in the world, and he's just this sort of unique player who they can't. If they lose Konrad Laimer, they could really struggle to replace him with any other player, even though their recruitment is pretty phenomenal, better than probably anyone else. The links they have at Salzburg, they're really good in that regard. But I can't really sit here and think of a player who they can sign and say that he can be a sure shot Konrad Laimer replacement. So I think I have doubts if he can move this summer, and I think the same applies for NDD as well. And for NDD, I think he doesn't really suit United and the way we play. Simple as that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. NDD was my first choice for a long time, but having seen the direction that United are going in, I think the ball playing capabilities, and that has to be very high up on the list when you're choosing a replacement for Matic. So I'm going to give Van der Beek, sadly, because I actually, in some ways, I'm more excited Van der Beek than I am about Sancho. I love Sancho, but Van der Beek's a wonderful player, and for the money being quoted, it's just an absolute bargain. So I'm going to say it's about 2 out of 5, if I'm honest, in terms of likelihood. What about you?
Yeah, probably less than 2, because I don't see him leaving at this point.
Okay, great. And let's move on to Koulibaly, who is another one of my favourites. I think it's fair to say that probably behind Virgil van Dijk, he's been one of the best centre-backs in the world for at least 2 or 3 seasons. And I think in this current climate, he is gold dust in terms of centre-back quality, where there's very few and far between. And what I like about him is he's very good on the ball, he's dynamic, his positional play is excellent. And he has that recovery pace, which is so crucial for teams playing the high line, such as ourselves. And what we've seen in the last few weeks is actually the Maguire Lindelof partnership isn't really working. I like both players, but if you look at the Spurs goal with Bergwijn, a quicker player would have been able to have tracked down Bergwijn and stopped him taking the shot. So it seems that he's reported to have a fee of £70 million, which is a bargain in this climate. And those complaining about his age. I mean, he's 8 days older than Kevin De Bruyne, and nobody would say no to Kevin De Bruyne, right? And I don't understand this thing about the age. Someone's 26, 27. It's crazy. You're talking about a player in his prime, and for me, it seems like City are the front runners, and it's a very scary prospect of him and Laporte, and it solves a massive problem which they've had all season, losing company, and then Otamendi's a disaster. I'm not sure Fabinho's worked particularly well. And in my opinion, if you're looking at Chelsea, they should be all over him. He should be their priority over Kai Havertz. You look at the defeat against West Ham, how poor their centre-backs have been poor all season. There's not one there, I would say, who is at the required level. And if they want to win titles, they need to be fixing their defensive problem first, because defences win titles, as we all know. So there's also reports of Liverpool being interested, and for me, I just can't see it, because reading several reports, money's tight, because if it wasn't tight, they would have bought Timo Werner. It seems like they might need to sell before they buy. So talk to me a little bit about Koulibaly, and what have you heard on the grapevine in terms of his potential prospects to City or Liverpool?
Whenever you're dealing with a club like Napoli, you really need to be careful about the business side of things, because Napoli owner Aurelio De Laurentiis is known to be a really, really shrewd manipulator and a really shrewd man even otherwise. What he's been basically trying to do over the last maybe 2 years is make sure that they link as many clubs as they can to Koulibaly. And out of, I think there's been 7 or 8 clubs in total that have been linked with him, at least over the last 3 or 4 months. I think only 2 of them are genuinely interested in him, and I think United are not one of them at this point, especially. And that doesn't include Liverpool as well. But Napoli have just been trying this thing for the last 2 years now, and they were sort of willing to sell him back in 2018 for around a fee of, say, 100 million, because that's how good he was at that point. But I think they tried that last summer as well, and that didn't quite work out either. So it's now come to a point where they've sort of replaced him already. They signed Amir Rahmani from Verona in January, and they'll probably sign Gabriel from Lille as well.
He's
so
a very good player.
he's a brilliant player. I think they now, just like I said for Ajax, they are now sort of getting desperate to sell him, because they've replaced him, and they are just looking to make sure that at 29 they are really, they're scared that after maybe he turns maybe 30 or something, that'll be the point when his value could maybe reach about 60 million or 50 million, and they really don't want to do that. So that's what they've really been trying over the last 3 years. And reports in Italy have always been going on about this, and I think 80% of them are really false. United wanted him, I think, back in 2018. I think he was on the short list, before we signed Maguire. But at this point, he won't really make sense for us, because, we spent, 85 million on Maguire, and I think Lindelof is a bit underrated in many regards, but I think he is perfect for Man City, because even though they usually sign players who have a younger profile, maybe about the age of 24, 25, but the way things are now, they sort of lack that big leader at the back, that influential leader. And I know they've been linked with Nathan Ake. I really like Nathan Ake, and they've been linked with Pau Torres as well from Villarreal, and I like him as well. But are they the sort of leaders that, but are they the sort of leaders that could potentially replace Ransom Company? I don't really think so, because they're still pretty young. They will probably need 6 or 7 years more, 4 or 5 years more to become a player who can marshal that City backline. And City clearly don't have that sort of a player. I think that's why Koulibaly just sort of suits them. Even the playing style that Koulibaly has really suits the way City play. They like to dominate possession. Koulibaly is brilliant on the ball. He likes to carry the ball into midfield, just like Guardiola wanted someone like John Stones to do, and what Gerard Piqué used to do, at Barcelona. And I know he's 29 and he can cost about 70 million, as you said, but there's no real fixed price to that. But City really need to look at what their needs are right now and just go for Koulibaly.
Yeah, that's a great summary, and it's kind of when you look at when United signed Maguire, the price was crazy and he's not worth that money. But United needed a centre back, and it doesn't matter what he cost. He has improved United, and I was always more in favour of Koulibaly than Maguire. I still potentially still am, but you're right about Lindelof. I think he brings some phenomenal qualities. I think his ball playing ability is excellent. I think he reads his game really well. His interceptions are underrated. Where he obviously has a big glaring issue, and it's under the high ball and his physicality. And unfortunately, in the Premier League, that would be something that would be a problem. And are United looking for a centre back, or is Ollie happy with his centre back pairing?
I think there will come a point where Solskjaer will look for a centre back. I mean, it could be the summer itself, but the sort of spending they want to do at this point isn't like they want to spend big on a centre back. They want someone who is of a younger profile than Koulibaly, of course, and someone who won't cost as much. And thirdly, someone who will not demand as much first team football as someone like Koulibaly will or someone like Upamecano will. So I think that's why I think Ben White and Joe Rodon were linked. And I think Joe Rodon is the sort of signing United should prioritize because we've got contacts in Wales with Ryan Giggs and all that things. That's why we are now sort of close to those Welsh players. I think Joe Rodon will be perfect for us, and I think maybe around summer of 2021, depending on how things go, we could look at a much senior centre back. But not really right now.
And what does this mean for Axel Tuanzebe? Because at 22 years old, he should really be fighting for that first team spot next to Maguire. I'm a massive fan. I think he has all the attributes to be a very good centre back. I think he's got good pace. He's physical. He's good under the high ball. He can play a bit as well. And unfortunately, though, no matter how good you are, if you've got an abysmal injury record, you cannot be relied on. And we've got him and Bailly, and I'm a big fan of Bailly as well. But I never say Bailly should start because until he shows me that he can stay fit for longer than a 10 game period, you can't rely on him. And we've got two. Let's not include Phil Jones and Rojo, but you've got Axel Tuanzebe. He's out now till the next season. Should we be looking to cash in on him now, or perhaps putting him towards Grealish? We'll talk about Grealish later in more depth. But is it time that actually we just say to Axel, go and play, put a buyback clause in, and then see how he does? Because he needs to be playing. This is crucial development in his early career that he needs to be playing week in, week out, developing his game, getting match fitness under him, and really pushing forward and being the centre back we know he can be. I mean, it's really difficult as a United fan because you're sentimental, aren't you, to these sort of players? But I just think that you can't rely on him, and it's not doing him any good sitting there as fourth choice centre back for Man United.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the centre backs United have, I think there are 5 total centre back options, and you look at them and say how many of them are completely reliable. How many of those 5 are players who you can look at and say you're going to play in the next game, and then give us a run of 10, 15 games if, say, Lindelof gets injured. I don't think we have a centre-back who can do that job. And I think for Tuanzebe, as you said, I feel pretty bad about him, but I think this summer might not just be the right time to sell him because the sort of player he is, he can play centre-back, he can play left-back, he can play right-back. I think he did play left-back against Arsenal, didn't he? Went for that Aubameyang goal, and then something weird happened for that. So I think he's the sort of player who's good on the ball. He's really good in the end. He's the sort of player that he's in the mold of someone that Solskjaer would like to have in the team. Like he would probably like someone like Koulibaly or Upamecano. So I think as much as you said, the prospect of maybe giving him out to Aston Villa and seeing how he develops, and then maybe add a similar clause that we have for Memphis Depay. Maybe we could do that, but I think we should probably wait for a season because what are they saying? I think he's out till September or something, right? September or, so if he's out
the beginning of next season, whenever that is.
Yeah, so if we, uh, because I think Ted and Mengi has started training with the first team. I think he is a real player. I think if we
Yeah,
give to Anze time, and by the time he sort of gets back into the first team mix and gets his fitness back on track, I think that could be the time when Mengi sort of covers up for him, and then when Tuanzebe is back fit and then sort of playing cup games for us, and then we could probably assess Mengi and his first team situation, and then see if we can loan him out and get him to play at a championship club or maybe a club like say West Ham or somewhere. So I think that should be the strategy because I think Tuanzebe is a really good player on his day. And I think I remember watching his debut against, I think it was against Arsenal or Spurs, I think, under Mourinho. I think he was
yeah,
really, really good in those games. So I think he just sort of suits the way we play and he suits our philosophy in a number of ways. So I think he probably deserves a bit of time. I feel sad because he is fit for say 2 months and then goes out for 2 months. Then we're waiting for him. Then he gets out injured again. But I think he just deserves time, and by that time we could probably bring in Mengi and give him some first team football.
absolutely. That's I completely agree with that. So, in terms of Koulibaly to Man City, what do you think the likelihood is out of five? I
I
would
think
say it's a 3.5 or 4.
yeah, 3.5. I was going to say that because I think the one
Yeah,
thing that is probably one thing that could probably avoid that move from happening is that the City ban situation. So even though I think Napoli won't play Champions League football this season, I think that's a strange thing that Koulibaly, no matter where his future lies, he may not play in the Champions League next season, even if he plays at Napoli or Man City. So it doesn't really make much of a difference. But I still say that because of the finances, the City have the prospect of playing Champions League football for the defender like Koulibaly is. Could still get a club like maybe Bayern Munich, who offer Champions League football, and for me are probably the best team in Europe right now. I think if they come calling
yeah,
for him,
agreed.
it'll be a brilliant move for them.
Absolutely. So let's move on to Kai Havertz, and I just want to say I think Chelsea have done some phenomenal business so far. Signing Timo Werner, I mean, I was a little bit gutted that United didn't even. Well, I know there was interest, and I know that Ollie did speak to him, but I'm just surprised United didn't maybe make more of an effort for him because I think if you look at his goals and assists this season, it's just phenomenal. I believe it's over 40 goals and assists for for Leipzig, and what he does offer is a lot of tactical flexibility. And I think it was quite clear that's what Frank Lampard wanted. He wanted a striker that could also play across the front three, and hence why they're interested in Aubameyang and Dries Mertens. Um, but when I look at Chelsea, I think Hakim Ziyech as well has signed, which is another very, very good signing at only £35 million. So then we move on to Kai Havertz, and if they can secure this guy, and this again, this is a generational talent, absolutely wonderful player, and I seem to be reading reports that he has an agreement in place with Leverkusen that allows him to move on in the next window. Um,
Yeah,
as long as obviously the fees hit. I believe it's about 100 million euros. I believe, I'm not too sure. You can correct me later on, but they missed out on Champions League football as well, which I think is quite big. And the
yeah,
big news coming out now is that Bayern out the race, and they've secured Leroy
yeah.
Sané for £41 million, which is incredible business. I know he's in his final year, but I mean, if there's one player I'd want, maybe instead of Sancho, it would have been like Leroy Sané, incredible player. And Real Madrid remain very interested, I believe, in Havertz, but it seems that Chelsea are in pole position. And what I like about him though is he's very flexible in terms of his
Yeah.
versatility. He can play number 10, he can play second striker, he can play on the wings. And for me, I know that United were heavily linked to him. And it does seem that there is concrete interest, but I've never seen it as anything other than an alternative to Sancho if Sancho doesn't happen. But it seems Sancho is very likely. So, talk to me a bit more about what you think of the reports of Havertz potentially to Chelsea and what his best position is.
I think, I mean, obviously, Bayern have made it clear that they are not really interested and they've backed away from that thing. But I think that that is actually a ploy to make sure that Leverkusen reduce the demands for him, like we might be doing for Jadon Sancho. because the thing with Bayern currently is that considering Thomas Muller's form, Bayern might not really need a player like Kai Havertz right away, and there's no point in paying about 90 million, 100 million for him at this point because of that. Sane joining, if Sane has joined, I think that won't really have a difference on what happens in the Kai Havertz stuff, because Bayern probably want to wait for another season to usher both Robert Lewandowski and Muller out. So it's a bit of a dilemma for them, but I still expect them to make some sort of a move for them, or at least try to make some sort of move. But going a bit tactically, I think he's a really, really smart player who can play anywhere across the front four. He's played as a striker this season, but I think the best sort of system that suits him is how Peter Bosch used him with Leverkusen in the second half of last season. I think he played on the right of 4-3-3. It was an attacking system where Leverkusen had a lot of the ball, and that's how Peter Bosch's team usually play. They're really attacking side. They play a 4-3-3 or maybe a 4-2-3-1. But after last season, the end of last season, I think they sort of wanted to add a bit of pragmatism to the way they play, because one thing with Peter Bosch is that he used to have this weakness of not having enough defensive attributes in his team, and that's what Jose Mourinho exploited when we beat them in the Europa League final. So this season he tried to play. There was I think, 2 or 3 month period where they played a 4-2-3-1 to make sure that they have extra defensive security in that midfield. So because of that, I think Havertz had a bit of a bad patch where he wasn't scoring as much, and Bayern Munich fans were saying that this guy's overrated and all that. But as soon as they switched back to that 4-3-3 and 3-4-3 system, I think, and around the time when Kevin Volland got injured, I think he started playing as a striker more often. And it just shows how smart a player he is, because he almost plays like a false nine, but you won't even realize when he makes a run in behind, like maybe Luis Suarez or someone. So I think he's a really, really smart player, and as you say, he is a generational talent. But I have this sneaky feeling that maybe Barcelona could come up with some of their weird club. They can do anything they want. They can come up with the weirdest of swap deals that you can imagine, and they need a sort of player like Kai Havertz, because you look at how Martin Braithwaite suits them. He suits them more than Antoine Griezmann does in many ways, because he is really good at having that pace to run in behind and making sure that the opposition backline won't sit tight. So Havertz is that sort of player who provides that. He can play up front. He can play on the right. I mean, he won't play at Barcelona because you've got Lionel Messi there. But for Chelsea, I think it doesn't make sense for them to sign Kai Havertz now. As you said, they've spent some money already. They had some cash in reserves to sign both Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech. And the only way I think they could spend big now is by probably selling off Jorginho to Juventus. That's still a possibility, I think.
Yeah.
I think, but the fee for that won't be maybe 60, 70 million. It won't be as high. So I don't really see Chelsea going from, if they really want to sign someone, they should sign a centre back and then a left back. That's why they're getting linked with those sort of defenders. But realistically, I don't think Chelsea will get him. A lot of clubs have been linked with Kai Havertz, but I think very few of them again are interested. Or if they are, or if the others are interested, I think he's just one of the names on the short list, like it's for Man United. I think he is one of the names on the short list, maybe fourth, third, or whatever, but he's not that top priority for all of them. That's why there's no real concrete news or from reliable sources that they've made an offer of, say, whatever that valuation is, 85, 90 million.
Very interesting. So if you were a betting man, are you expecting him to remain at Leverkusen for one more season and then perhaps move to Bayern Munich? Because I just can't see how Bayern will let a player like him go, especially being German as well. It kind of puzzles me. Like he's perfect for their system as well. Like you said, Thomas Muller's had a great season, but he's not getting younger, and they'd regret missing out on Havertz.
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think staying at Leverkusen could be a good option, but they're not playing Champions League football. They're not playing Champions League football this season either. But I think Leverkusen haven't really brought in a player who can be a like-for-like replacement for Kai Havertz. Uh, so if he does stay, it'll only be a good thing for him and for Leverkusen, even if they don't get Champions League football. So I think if I had to rate the possibility of him staying at Leverkusen, I think would easily be 3 out of 5, maybe.
And the possibility of joining Chelsea out of 5. I'm quite
Probably.
scared, to be honest. I think it might be about a 3 out of 5 to join Chelsea.
Yeah, it can actually happen because the way Chelsea work with Roman Abramovich, they can do weird stuff. But presuming that they're sensible, I think it's probably 1 out of 5. But it's only a general presumption, nothing more.
Okay, brilliant. So let's talk about Edinson Cavani, because what a player he is. I've always been a massive fan. I think he's an incredible player. You look at his goal record at PSG, it's 200 goals in 301 games. You know, he's the all-time leading goal scorer at the club, 19 trophies in a very, very successful period for PSG. You know, I think he could benefit a lot of sides. If you just look in the Premier League, I think Man United wouldn't be a bad option for him. Naturally, I'd love a player of that caliber, and he'd push Martial to another level, I think. Even Liverpool, you look at Roberto Firmino's record this season of goals, it's very, very, very poor. He had a good start, maybe first 2 months, and he really dropped off. And I do think that his lack of goal prowess has actually hindered Liverpool from having a season which, you know, maybe about halfway through the season, you thought they could have won multiple trophies, and it's kind of been a little bit of a damp squib in that respect for them. And I think for me, though, it seems like he's more likely to go to Inter Atletico to replace Lautaro Martinez or Diego Costa. So what do you think of him as a player, and what are the likelihood that he ends up in either Italy or Atletico? Because we might as well talk about Lautaro as well. I believe that Barcelona are very, very interested in him. A wonderful player. And I think that is, I guess, the big transfer that they really want. So what's your view?
I think firstly for Cavani, I think he was always going to leave PSG because I was told that PSG will keep just one of Mauro Icardi or Cavani, and since Icardi was a younger option, and I think this says a lot about how the transfer market and the transfer policies of big clubs have been. Not for big clubs, I think smarter clubs has been. And because of that, I think getting a new club can be pretty complicated because the way top clubs and efficient clubs function is that they will never hand big wages to a player who's what, 33 maybe. Is he 33? I think he is 33.
Yeah.
Unless he's a sure shot starter and if he'll play every game. If you look at the striker situation of the top clubs currently, there aren't really clubs who need a regular striker who uh, can earn big wages. So, as you mentioned, Atletico Madrid, I think Atletico Madrid statistically they underperformed a lot on their expected goals metric this season. So, I think he could be a good signing for them. But again, I think they're probably the likeliest to sign him as well. But the thing with him is that the wages again. Atletico spent a lot over the last 1 year or whatever. They signed Joao Felix and then signed Alvaro Morata as well. I think Joao Felix was obviously he's taken time to settle in, and I think he will be a much more improved player next season. But I don't really see how Atletico could maybe afford him in terms of wages. And as for Inter, I think they were looking for a target man type of striker who come on from the bench and add something different to the side, because the way Inter play is a bit like the centre backs play the ball out to the wing backs, and the wing backs play the front two in Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez. It's not like they have a plan B. They've dropped the most number of points from winning positions this season, and that's cost in the Scudetto title. So they do need a striker of that Cavani profile, but there's a reason why they were looking at players like Giroud or Fernando Llorente. So them going after players like them makes much more sense because they ask for less wages, and even if Lautaro does leave, they can't really afford wages of a player like Cavani at this point, and they could do that for Sanchez because he was on loan with us and we paid a part of his wages. They can't obviously do that for Cavani. So I think another interesting thing could be the MLS, because Inter Miami, David Beckham's club, they are looking for that big striker signing. I was told that Mario Mandzukic was close to moving there, but that couldn't really go over the line. They signed a striker from Celtic called Lewis Morgan. He obviously is not a big name, so signing Cavani will make sense for them. So I think that's one thing that we really need to keep on, probably moving to the MLS or then maybe Atletico, because there's no real options. And I think for United, again, the same thing, wages. Will he come to United if there's we have a playing style which doesn't really suit the sort of a target man player that he is? Will he play regularly? I mean, can we sacrifice someone like Martial's development or Greenwood's development? I don't think it's exactly about that, but it's just about what his demands are, whether we can suit them in terms of the number of minutes he wants to play.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think in terms of ability, a lot of teams would love to have him, especially off the bench. But yeah, you're right, completely right. In terms of his wages, I mean, he's probably going to demand 250,000 a week, and then you got to think just because you're free, and this is something that football fans forget. Just because you're free does not mean that it's going to be a free transfer. The amount of money that you pay as a signing on fee, you just have to look at Aaron Ramsey's transfer, even Emre Can's transfer to Juve as well. That Juve are great at picking up free transfers, and that's why I thought maybe Juventus, because they clearly are looking for a striker. I mean, they've been linked to Raúl Jiménez, who I think is a wonderful player. They wanted Erling Haaland. It looks like Higuain might go. So would that be a possible destination for Cavani?
Yeah, I think Juventus are interesting thing here because they need a striker at this point, and Higuain is probably leaving. He was about to get sold last summer, but they were actually looking to make sure that they sell enough players, sell like Higuain and maybe Douglas Costa and probably Daniel Irigoni and Bernardeschi, make sure that they make some room for Icardi to come in and play. That couldn't really happen. Higuain was linked with, I think, Roma and Napoli. I think the sort of striker that Maurizio Sarri wants at Juventus is someone who can press high up the pitch. That's one reason why they are sort of falling off the pace this season. But Cavani is not really that sort of unselfish striker who can help Cristiano Ronaldo play, help the others in the team play. He's more of that person who wants to score all the goals himself. I mean, no disrespect, of course, but that's just his playing style. But there's a reason why they're being linked with Arek Milik, because he won't demand as much wages, of course, but he is someone who suits Juventus a bit more than maybe Cavani does. Raúl Jiménez as well. I think Jiménez and Milik will be excellent signings for Juventus if, of course, they can afford it.
Yeah, excellent points. And so likelihood, let's say, of Cavani to the MLS, what would you say out of 5?
Since there's nothing really going on there, maybe just 1 to 2. Because I'm not really sure if that can, because there's no real concrete stuff going on. Because I mean, I've not read anything about him being linked with an MLS move, so I'll say 1 to 2 maybe.
Okay, brilliant. Now let's move on to Arthur and the Pjanic swap deal. I mean, this has got to be one of the most bizarre transfers I've seen in a while, and for me, it just seems about balancing the books. I've read a few things. I mean, you can go in more detail. You're more knowledgeable, but my understanding is, to do with putting, for example, the profits next year and putting transfer fees here or the other way around. You can explain that, but I think in terms of Pjanic, I used to be a big fan of his, but I just think over the last maybe couple of seasons, it's definitely been a decline. I think apart from his free kick abilities, not like he takes them anymore with Ronaldo and Dybala in the side, I think he's not offering much, and he's really been. I think Sarri's had a real issue with midfield this season. I think Pjanic playing in that deep position hasn't worked the way he wanted to, as let's say a Jorginho, and that's really hindered the way Sarri wants to play. And I think Pjanic is aging, overrated, perhaps. I think he's in decline. And then you look at what Juventus have got in return is Arturo, and I think he's a wonderful player. Great age, perfect for the Sarri system. I mean, you're looking at now their midfield. They've got Bentancur maybe to play deep, and Kulusevski, I mean, I think that's just. I mean, he's a real talent. And I think now you're starting to see a new midfield. But what is going on at Barcelona? And just talk to me about this transfer and the sort of intricacies of it. 'Cause I don't get it.
I think it's probably the most bonkers of transfers that I've seen in recent years, because it makes zero sense from a sporting perspective, especially for Barcelona. It does make sense in one way for Juventus, but the purpose, as you said, was to balance the books by earning. I think the amount that both the parties had to earn, I think about 50 million, 55 or 60 million, around that area. They had to earn that by the 30th of June. If they didn't do that, they could have risked an investigation from the FFP and all that legal stuff. So Pjanic arrived at Juventus in summer 2016, and Arthur arrived for a similar fee in 2018. So the idea here is that the Pjanic contract has been amortized more than the Arthur contract. So that's why Barcelona had to get some cash in return to make sure that they get this deal over the line. And I think there's a background to all of this by if we go back to the summer of 2019, because I heard that Juventus sporting director Fabio Paratici had flown over to Barcelona towards towards the last 2 or 3 days of the summer transfer window, the European transfer window, not the English one. So he'd flown over to Barcelona to make sure that they either swap some players or Juventus just sell them some of their players, because the idea, as I said before, was to get some cash in and sign Mauro Icardi. They had failed to do that before Paratici flew over to Barcelona. They tried everything they could. They tried offering Rugani to all sorts of clubs. He failed move to Roma and all that stuff. So I think he went there, and I think players like Bernardeschi, Douglas Costa, and all these deadwoods, as you might call it, were offered, and Barcelona were willing to probably offer Ivan Rakitic, and then the idea of exchanging Pjanic and Rakitic came up. Nothing really happened, even though there was concrete stuff in there. But I think there was a framework already for this, and there were talks that Juan Miranda from Barcelona could have joined Juventus, but in the end he ended up moving to Schalke because he wanted to move to Schalke. He was not interested in moving to Juventus. That's one deal that could have happened, and that those sort of talks just laid down the foundation of what's happened now. But I think Juventus are just now trying to turn themselves into this powerhouse super club, and that started, of course, with signing Cristiano Ronaldo. They're just trying to make sure that every single summer transfer window they sign one big superstar player. And I think Fabrizio Romano also reported this, that they are looking for one superstar signing this summer as well. And we don't really know who this is now, because Pogba is now probably out of the question.
Yeah.
It was De Ligt last summer. It probably be Milik this summer if they put him under the tag of being a superstar signing. But playing wise, I think Juventus are getting a brilliant deal out of the Arthur thing, and a much better one than Barca. Because as for Pjanic, I think the thing with him is that he's not as quick as he used to be. So technically, he's not quick enough to play in the number 10 role, and he has never really been a hard worker on the pitch as well. So he can't play a box-to-box role, and he's neither a ball winner, so he can't play a defensive midfield role either. So that's one dilemma that Juventus have been facing with him, because he's played that regista role as the deepest midfielder, but he's not the most progressive passer, or he's not as progressive in his passing as Jorginho used to be. And although he did start the season really, really well, he almost won them the game against Brescia earlier in the season. He seemed like that solution to that Jorginho problem that Sarri could have faced. But around the December time period, he sort of fell off a cliff. There was this game against Hellas Verona when he was at fault for the Fabio Borini goal, and from then on, Sarri sort of lost trust in playing him as the anchorman of the midfield. He played Bentancur there for I think 3 games in a row, and he was brilliant in all these 3 games. There was one game in which Bentancur, I think, played as many as 111 passes in one single game, 111 successful passes. So it just shows how versatile a player Bentancur is, and Pjanic isn't quite the player that he used to be. And as you said, you call him overrated. I think I'll call him the same. Even though I really like the sort of technician he is, I think he's the sort of player who can't really adjust to how the direction in which modern day football is moving to.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal answer, and it brings us, I guess, nicely onto Griezmann, because this is one that's just emerged the last few days, and like going on with how Barca run their transfer policy. You think about how much money they've wasted on Coutinho, they've wasted on Dembele. I wouldn't say Griezmann's a waste of money, but I was very upset when Griezmann didn't sign for Man United, because he was that perfect player at that perfect time. And if it weren't for the transfer ban, I think we'd be seeing him at Old Trafford, and it probably would have meant that Lukaku wouldn't have joined. And now there's reports that he wants the United move. I don't know the sort of validity of those reports, whether it's just paper talk. But Setien did say something quite harsh about him, I think. Didn't he, the other day? He said, I've got a Griezmann problem. He hasn't seemed to really have clicked with Messi. I mean, I don't think Messi is exactly the easiest character to get on with. And then you've got a situation where he wants to play with Suarez. Suarez is aging. I mean, I honestly see when Messi goes, I see Barca potentially ending up going down the route United have, in terms of wasted money, manager after manager. And now there's reports that Xavi is going to take over, signing a £5.4 million a year deal. So talk to me a bit about Griezmann, what's been going on with him, and is there any chance he'll leave? Because if you think about it, if Inter are going to have to sell Arturo, then I would be saying, give me Griezmann. I imagine him and Arthur playing together, that could be quite frightening.
But I think as soon as Griezmann came to Barcelona, I had this suspicion, if you might call it that, there's no way he and Lionel Messi are going to play in the same team. Because if you look at the way Griezmann used to play for Atletico Madrid, I think the early times of Atletico, when he came from Real Sociedad, that was the only time when he used to play on the left wing. As soon as the second season came and Simeone thought he could be a perfect second striker, that's why as the time went on, he became that perfect connection between midfield and attack for France and for Atletico Madrid as well. So I think as soon as he came to Barcelona, I thought he can't play with Messi. There's something about this which is, again, non-sporting. And the non-sporting thing with it is that Josep Maria Bartomeu is only really interested in making sure that he makes superstar signings so that he can appease the Barcelona fan base and the board members and make sure that he gets enough votes in the next presidential elections and all that stuff. That's what he usually plans to do when he tries to make a superstar signing every single transfer window. And you look at the Lautaro Martinez thing, I think there are players in the Martinez mold out there in the market. The Barcelona could easily go out and sign for a much, much lesser fee, or maybe just less than 3 times his fee. They could have signed Timo Werner. He's a lot like Martinez, as he can play as a second striker really well. But they were never really interested in a player like that, and that's, I think, again, down to because of maybe they don't really have that sort of scouting system which allows them to make signings like Timo Werner. They just want to make sure that Bartomeu gets elected in the next election somehow, and he appeases the fans by signing someone like Martinez, spend 110 million, prove to fans that we can spend a lot on these big name players, and then some months later they're going to get knocked out of the Champions League anyway. So I think all this mess is going to get sorted out as soon as someone new comes in as a Barcelona president. I think the elections are maybe later this year in 2021. So I think this mess is going to carry on for some few months till the time Bartomeu is there.
Yeah, very interesting. It's crazy in Barcelona because it's just so political, isn't it? Really, and I wasn't really a Valverde fan. I thought for the way that the talent they had on the pitch, they weren't playing a particularly exciting brand of football. And I thought Quique Setien, I mean, his Real Betis team was phenomenal. They played some of the best football in Europe, and I thought, wow, this is going to be a match made in heaven. And he's come in and it's just been a disaster. And it doesn't seem like Messi and a lot of the key players respect him as a manager, or
Yeah.
are taking much notice of what he's saying, and it is only going to end one way. And if I was Barcelona, and this hurts me because I love Mauricio Pochettino, but that's who they should be going for next. Phenomenal manager, and who Man United manager should Oli not hit the heights that we want him to. But let's move on to Jack Grealish, and we touched him earlier. You know, we sort of compared him to Van der Beek, and in terms of his price would be a lot more steep than Van der Beek signing, but it does seem inevitable that he is going to be leaving Villa because they're going to get relegated, and I think it's at the right time. It seems that United have been linked with him, and it would be a good fit, I think. I'm a big fan of his. I used to be more of a Maddison fan, but as I've watched him more this season, I think he offers a lot more than Maddison, and he doesn't go hiding in games. I think Maddison's gone hiding I would say last couple. Well, obviously before the restart, I don't think Leicester have been very good. And what I like about Grealish is that he's an excellent dribbler. He has an eye for goal. He has versatility. He can play on the left side. He can play central midfield, attacking midfield. I mean, what have you heard in terms of United interest? Because it's obvious that it's concrete. I've heard that he's looking around Manchester for a house, or he's bought a house. Not sure how true that is, but can United sanction the moves for both him and Sancho in one window? And does he start for United? Because looking at that midfield, I'm not sure he does. And then he could perhaps rotate with Rashford on the left. And I'd much prefer him on the left than, say, James, because like you say, I just don't think James is ready. He's still very raw. So what's your view on the potential move to United? And would we be able to sign both him and Sancho in one window?
I mean, I think Jack Grealish is easily a top 6 player. I mean, I think he's ranks top 10 in the Premier League for shot creation actions, progressive ball carries, and a number of other things. That sort of progressive ability that he's got on the ball, be it in terms of passing or carrying the ball, is massive for the top clubs these days, especially the way the Premier League top clubs are heading into. I mean, for teams that have a technical system, I think he's going to be a really big asset. He's got everything that teams need in a modern day ball carrier. I think if United don't really get him, which I think they probably will, I think a club like Man City will be after him pretty desperately, because considering how they play the ball in midfield and how much Grealish loves the ball to be on his feet, with David Silva leaving, they need a player in that position. I think Phil Foden is of course a tailor-made replacement for Silva as well. But Grealish just has this thing about him which is really infectious. He's got that baggage about him which makes you think that he's you can call him a leader. I can't really describe what sort of character he is. I think I wrote an article about him and I was just struggling to define the sort of abilities and that aura that Jack Grealish has about him. Is probably that leadership ability that he has. But I think even if Villa stay up, Grealish will probably leave. And the way Dean Smith has got Aston Villa playing in recent weeks is actually a disgrace to the way Jack Grealish plays and the way Matt Target likes to play. They just hoof the ball up front to Keenan Davis or whoever the Ali Samata guy. They just hoof the ball up front to him, then just do nothing. That's big injustice to someone like Jack Grealish. He's got to play in a deeper position. He's got to win those big fouls that he wins in much deeper areas. That's not a part of his game. So I think it just shows that he fits a system where teams have a lot of the ball and he can play as close to the goal as possible. I think if you say that United can't really offer him first team football, I think the case there is that we play in 4 competitions. I think so the thing is that we need someone apart from Bruno Fernandes who can get that team together when we're losing or in a tough situation, and that lead the team forward and help them score goals. And Grealish is the sort of person who has got this sort of background where he's an incredibly responsible person. Forget all that he's done off the pitch during lockdown and all that. I mean, everyone has those fair share of goals. But Grealish has just that sort of player who understood the idea of taking responsibility at a very young age. Because when Villa got relegated, I think he had some other controversy going on. He was that naughty little teenager who couldn't get off the pitch, get stuff off the pitch right. But he just matured as soon as Villa went up to that financial bankruptcy period. It was, I think, pretty sudden when he became that leader who wanted to lead Villa into back into the Premier League. He Villa was struggling financially. He could have easily left for Spurs, and he, I think, wanted to move to Spurs as well, but he ended up staying, knuckled down his position in the midfield, and played anywhere the manager wanted him to play, and then guided them to the Premier League. He has his faults, of course, everyone does, but he just has this many factors that Solskjaer will like in a player. He has that work ethic that he absolutely loves. He is still pretty young. He's what, 24. He's English. I mean, people say that having English players in a team is bad, but I think it's really, really important for having that core group of players who have this work ethic about them. Grealish really fits that, and the playing style as well. So I think, I think he will play enough games as well. If we really want to compete on all four fronts, if not on four, I think if just on two fronts, the European stuff and the Premier League, I think a player like Grealish has a lot in him to give to a club like United.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I would be a bit worried to see him go to City because I think he would go to another level under Pep in that system. And for me, I think you're right. I went to university in Birmingham, so when I was there, Grealish was fairly. I mean, I'm 25, so he's similar age to me, and it's a difficult place to be the key man because if you think about, let's look at like Ross Barkley or even Steven Gerrard, the pressure of being the homegrown talent in these sort of cities. It's a way, you've got the world on your shoulders really. So the fact that he's stepped up and he's performing week in, week out, he stands out in the Villa team. It's a very poor Villa team, but he still stands out. And for me, when I'm having a look at it, I think he fits the profile mentality-wise. You're right, you need to have a British core in there. I mean, I was never a fan of signing Longstaff, but if they're quality British like Sancho and Grealish, I'm all for it because I think he would be very attracted to the progress they're making, and also this idea that he can contribute to bringing United back to where it wants to be. And that's for any young. Look, he's 24 years old. When he was younger, I was younger. It was all United. Like they were the team that was winning, and now we've gone through a rough patch. And if you ask any youngster who's that sort of age playing in the Premier League, would they want to bring United back to where it was? They would bite your hand off. So for me, the likelihood, it's a difficult one. I think Sancho's will happen, and then we have to bring in a midfielder minimum. And it seems that he's more likely. There are reports that he's in personal terms. For me, I'm going to say 3.5 out of 5. Not because I don't think we're interested, because I'm not sure how much he's going to cost. If they go down, the price should be slashed. But will we go and sanction that money? Because I believe we have to sell before we can buy, unfortunately, which is ludicrous. I mean, is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'll probably rate that thing around the same 3.5 mark, because as you say, the price thing is probably the trickiest, because early on I think it was said that his price could be as much as say 70 million or something, and I think that's why we have started looking at probably guys like Van der Beek, who are maybe better than Grealish and suit us more and are cheaper as well. So I think that could be one thing that maybe can complicate this thing.
Absolutely. So let's move on to Bayern Munich, and we can do both these players together. So David Alaba and Thiago. Now, let's start with Alaba. I think he's one of the most underrated players of the last decade. I think he's phenomenal. He's a world-class left-back, and now he's an excellent centre-back. Hansi Flick has done some incredible stuff at Bayern Munich, and I would agree with you. You did say that they're probably the best team in Europe, and the way they dismantle Chelsea, the way they run, the signings they make, for the value. I mean, I believe they've signed Goretzka, Lewandowski, Gnabry, Sane, Alphonso Davies for a combined total of 65.5 million. And that's pretty much half the team. So I think they're just an excellently run club. But David Alaba, there are slight murmurs that he is on his way to PSG, or there is interest. I mean, can you see that happening? And I mean, maybe it's a time for a change. And Thiago, the reports coming out today, and this one would hurt for me because missing out on Thiago back in 2014 because Moyes chose Fellaini instead of Thiago. Thiago was around what £20 million, something like that.
Yeah.
I remember I was on holiday in Spain and I was talking to the Spanish people. And I was saying, "Look, so Thiago's going to go to United." They're like, yeah, Thiago will join. That's the rumours. Come back home and found out he's gone to Bayern Munich, and that one still hurts to this day. What will hurt even more if he joins Liverpool, and that's the reports. I'm not convinced he fits Klopp's system. I think he's 29 years old. I think he's injury prone. I think that's fair to say. I don't know if he'd be able to suit the sort of high tempo, pressing nature of the way that Klopp expects his team to play. Because I think halfway through the season he'll break down with injury. He seems to get a lot of muscle injuries. Man United, is that a potential destination for him? And it seems it's inevitable that he will leave Bayern Munich. But where's he going to go? Or is Liverpool's interest and likely destination true?
I think for both Alaba and Thiago, it's a classic case of Bayern being played about by the agents of these players. The same applies for Thiago as well, as I say, because over the last 2 years, Bayern have been facing similar situations with Thomas Muller, Lewandowski, and Manuel Neuer, when their agents have made this constant noise about why they would leave, and they've even clearly mentioned interest from some other clubs as well. And it was pretty clear for Lewandowski's thing when his agent Pini Zahavi, he publicly gave an interview that Lewandowski will not sign a new contract and he's leaving. He named Juventus and all these clubs as possible suitors for him, but in the end he signed a new contract. And the strangest thing with all the things that happen around the Bayern key players and reports saying that they can leave is that every single time these reports come out is after they've held contract talks. And that's really weird because it's a clear indication that these players are looking for more money in their contracts. It happened for Muller and Manuel Neuer as well. Neuer was getting linked with Chelsea, and Muller, as always, used Man United as a bargain chip for getting higher wages. I think for Alaba this year, the strangest thing I found about David Alaba is that I think this was back in February or somewhere when Man City were linked with him a lot. I sort of started getting scared if they really got him because he suits him really, really well. But Christian Falk, the reliable Christian Falk, said that he rejected City because he wanted to move to Spain. But in recent days, those Man City rumors have come up again. But if he's rejected City already, why will those rumors come back? So that really doesn't make sense for me, and that's why I sort of smell a fish in there. And that's, again, a way of getting a new contract with Bayern. And speaking of Thiago, I think for Liverpool, I think he doesn't really match the transfer policy and the way they go about transfers, because currently I think they've got the oldest player on their team is James Milner, and after him they've got Gini Wijnaldum. I think he's 29 now, and then they've got 4 or 5 players who are 28. I think Joel Matip is 28, Van Dijk is 28, and their front three is 28. So it just shows how smart they are for when they sign players. I mean, the fact that all of them are from the same age group and were brought around the same time. And interestingly, Wijnaldum is 29, and Wijnaldum signed for them before the other 3 did. So it just shows that they usually sign players who are around the age group of maybe 25 or maximum 26, or like for Minamino, they signed him for when he was 23 or something. So it shows that they will never spend too much money on a player who is 29, will want big wages. And as you said, he's injury prone. He constantly gets those injury niggles here and there. He missed some games recently as well. Even though I think on paper he suits a lot of clubs because of how complete a midfielder he is. Even for United, because I think we would love a player like Thiago in the current team. Even though we have Pogba playing that role, he is a massive upgrade on what Fred is. He can win the ball back. From the outside, doesn't look he can win the ball back, but he's a brilliant tackler. He intercepts the ball really, really well. Plays the ball, breaks the lines. He does just about everything you want a perfect midfielder to do, and I think he's world class, for me, miles better than Marco Verratti is. But again, I think he's probably staying no matter how much the Bayern guys say that he's not signing a new contract. I think there is a chance for Thiago to leave. I think he's slightly more likely to leave than Alaba because uh, Bayern are being a bit more clear about this thing than they've been about Alaba.
Yeah, I'd agree. I actually can see Thiago going. I think there's just too much. I mean, some of the comments, there's just too much smoke without fire. I think Alaba was just
Yeah.
one where it might have been testing the waters. And I mean, I would take. I think Alaba would walk into most back forwards in Europe. Thiago, I really don't want to see him go to Liverpool. I think Thiago is about three out of five to leave. I would say Alaba's probably one or two. I don't. I think he is angling for a new contract, and if Bayern win the Champions League, and they look like they've refreshed their side with some young talent, they're going to be an absolute force of nature for the next few years.
Yeah, I think for Alaba, I think for Bayern Munich, a lot of people say that Lewandowski is so important to them, but I think for Bayern Munich, Alaba, Thiago, and Joshua Kimmich are much more important than Lewandowski is, considering the way they like to play the ball out from the back. And I think Arsene Wenger said this in some interview or something, that ever since Niko Kovac left and Hansi Flick started playing Alaba at centre back, their XG per 90 increased by a good margin. So it says a lot about what he's done to their system and the sort of thing that Hansi Flick is trying. And I think I'll also say that Thiago is slightly more likely to leave. And if I want to rate Alaba potentially leaving, it's probably a 1 out of 5. For Thiago, maybe 2.5. 2 days ago, I was probably at 0.5 for him. What's happened in the last 2 days, I'm starting to get a bit convinced. But I think Liverpool won't sign him. Juventus maybe can. You never know about Juventus and clubs like Barcelona.
Yeah, no, Barcelona is definitely a shout. I mean, he should really just be playing at Barcelona under Pep. That's what he was born to do. Really, he was meant to be Barcelona's midfielder for years, and it's been a bit of a shame that he's gone to Bayern. But he's been very good. He's been a great buy for them. But okay, let's talk about Upamecano, and then we've got two more after that, Bellingham and Gomez. But Upamecano, I think he's a very talented centre back, only 21. I think his ball distribution's good. He's an excellent tackler, well-rounded. I mean, I must say, when I've seen him play since Project Restart, I think he's been very poor for Leipzig. I think, in general, Leipzig haven't been brilliant. They've been stuttering a bit. I'm a big fan of Nagelsmann. I mean, I love the project they've got over there. They've got Ralf Rangnick sitting as the director of football. I believe he might go to Milan, which would be a great signing for them. But he's really the brains behind the whole operation, in my opinion. But with Upamecano, there's 1 year left, I believe, on his contract, and he has a release clause of around £54.7 million. Arsenal are interested. What's the likelihood of Arsenal signing him? Because I think that would be huge for them. When I look at Arsenal centre-back options, it's shocking, but Saliba's coming back. I think Arsenal fans need to relax a little about Saliba, because you're getting the impression that Saliba's the second coming of Maldini, the way that Arsenal are talking about him. He's 19 years old. He's played for a mid-table French side, and they need to relax with the pressure on him. They've signed David Luiz, just shocking. I don't know why. They've signed Mari as well, who on a 4-year contract. Not sure why. They've got a lot of centre-backs there, which they'll need to get rid of. You've got Rob Holding, you've got Socrates, you've got Mustafi as well. So what are the chances that Arsenal sign him, and what's your view on him as a player? Because I think he's good talent.
Yeah, I think the clubs that want Koulibaly could easily seek a younger option by signing Upamecano himself, because they have really similar traits. They play the ball out from the back, carry the ball into midfield really efficiently. But of course, I think Upamecano sometimes just make those errors defensively. On the ball, he's just brilliant. There was this one dribble against, I think, Spurs in the Champions League, where he picked up the ball from the defensive areas and just dribbled the ball into their final third and nearly scored as well. I think that just shows the sort of player he is, but sometimes he can just lose this sort of concentration, if that's the right word. He can make those strange errors that new that 17-year-old defenders can often make. But that's one thing that he can still learn at Leipzig. And I think for Arsenal, I think Arsenal have got a lot of players who need to be chucked out of that team. But the way they function and the way their ownership works, with the fact that Edu is now the sporting director there, I think it sometimes just concerns me, because the reason why he's there, I mean, not the main reason, I think one of the reasons why he's there is to make sure that they get cheap deals through the contacts that Edu has with the agents from Brazil. Uh, that's why I think they signed Pablo Mari as well. He costed them pretty less, signed him on loan, make sure that his value reduced till the summer. Good, it's a good thing for them that the pandemic happened and they could sign him for cheap, or else his value could have been a bit more as well. So that's what they did for Cedric Soares as well. That's, I think, the main idea for Southampton was to bring Kyle Walker-Peters in, and since Cedric was having a pretty poor season, they couldn't do far worse than him. So they just made sure that he goes away to Arsenal, and then they let him leave for free, and then somehow they do the Højbjerg deal and get the Kyle Walker-Peters deal in a swap thing as well. But the thing at Arsenal is that they can't really do proper defensive deals. I know Saliba was pretty good, but they somehow messed that up as well for the cup final thing that happened recently. But they just find new ways to mess up their defensive transfers. They sign stopgap defenders when they can easily spend big on them rather than spending big on attacking players. Yeah. But I think I'm really concerned for Arsenal in a good way, because the way their transfer approach has gone on to be, the recruitment of Edu, they will probably do deals that are much more cheaper than Upamecano. That's why I think they were looking at Stade Reims' Axel Disasi, who's again a really good defender. I really like him, and he's a bit in the Upamecano mold, but he isn't quite a ball carrier, but he's sort of a bit like him and much cheaper as well. So I think they might not look for Upamecano because of his big price. And I think for Upamecano, I think it could well turn out to be a lot like Timo Werner again, because they handed him a new contract, kept him at the club for another season, and just sort of guaranteed him that he can leave next summer for whatever that tutor price was, I don't know. So they can do that because I think Upamecano just needs to develop defensively a bit as well. He, as I said, he makes schoolboy defensive errors sometimes, and he can certainly learn that. Leipzig, they're playing in the Champions League. There's nothing wrong with playing in the Champions League at this point, obviously. They're competing for the title as well. So I don't see any harm in him staying at Leipzig, even though I think Man City could look at him. But again, he still needs to mature a bit to reach that Koulibaly level and potential replace Company at City.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think Arsenal's operating model, they've got a self-sustaining operating model, haven't they? Where essentially what they sell or what money comes in with European football, that's what they can spend, which is crazy. But that's the way their owners are. The owners, again, care about the bottom line. It's about profit. They're not going to go and sanction, It seems to me that, okay, they've signed Lacazette for 50-odd million. They signed Aubameyang for 60-odd million. Players that look like they're going to sell shirts who are attacking, they're happy to go and spend the money. Pepe, over 70 million. But the ones that they actually need, the ones that are perhaps less flashy, they're not prepared to go and spend the big money. Yeah. For me, Arsenal, Upamecano, I think there's definite concrete interest. But I don't see them splashing 50, 55 million on his release clause. So I would say it's about a 2 out of 5, perhaps a 1 out of 5 for me. What about you?
Yeah, 1 for me as well, because they can't really afford it, because they really need to sell players at this point rather than signing them. That's what the reports are saying, that they really need to move players like maybe Matteo Guendouzi on and even Lacazette on, and make sure that they get some money. And I don't really know how they can sign Thomas Partey as well. So 1 out of 5.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's move on to the final 2 players, and these are 2 young players. So Jude Bellingham, I think we're all aware that he's going to join Dortmund, and his words were the appealing project and the first team chances. And it's just a bit odd, because this is the second player now that's rejected United, or United have lost out on, to Dortmund. And is that a cause of concern? Because for me, the fact that Oli couldn't sign a player that played for him, that he gave his debut, is pretty startling, to be honest. I mean, I don't know whether that's because of what he thinks of Oli as a manager, or if he thinks that United isn't the best place for a young talent to develop. Now, I want to break that down because, for me, I think United has emerged as a really excellent place for young players to develop, and you just have to look at Mason Greenwood, Brandon Williams. I think Chong's getting some opportunities. Tuanzebe, if he's fit, would get opportunities. Ollie's definitely integrating the youngsters as well. And if you look at the other big clubs, apart from perhaps Chelsea, I wouldn't say that, and Arsenal, I wouldn't say Liverpool's a great place for young talent at all. Like you said, they've got an older squad. City, Foden's been used sparingly, but he's been excellent when he's played. And sadly to say, I think Haaland made the right decision going to Dortmund. I think it's a perfect stepping stone for young talent. But it shows bad scouting, because then United are going to go and look to Sancho for over 100 million, let's say, or close to that mark. When in essence they should have been getting these players young, like Hannibal, who plays Medjugorje, who plays for us in the academy. He looks a real talent, and then bringing them in. And does that say a lot about United's appeal as a club for young talent, or is it just a case that Dortmund is just one of the best places for a young player to develop? And then my second question is Angel Gomez. There seems to be a bit of a hysteria on Twitter with Gomez that he's a player who United are going to regret going. And I think he showed really nice flashes of talent earlier on when he was in the reserves, but he just hasn't developed the way that we've hoped, or he's hoped. I don't think he's a big loss, if I'm honest. I think he needs to go play regular football, and it's quite clear that if he was showing something in training, Oli would have played him, because you've got Lingard and Pereira there. So for me, there's no excuses. I don't think Gomez has the right mentality. I wish him all the best, but I don't think he's going to be much of a loss. And where do you see him going? Because I think he'll probably go abroad. He is quite small. He's not physically imposing, and I think he would have struggled in the Premier League.
I think for Jude Bellingham, I think for him was, or even for Erling Haaland, I think the thing for them isn't the idea of United. I think for them it's the idea of playing in Germany. Because I think German football, or just the Bundesliga specifically, has become this place where youngsters can come in and develop, especially from that part of the world where maybe Austria or maybe Croatia or maybe the Scandinavian countries. Players can come in there and play for 2 years and then seek bigger moves abroad. So I think it's not about United. If Dortmund hadn't signed Erling Haaland, I think United would have signed him anyway, because I think after if you look at the Premier League, Chelsea, I think the thing about them playing the youth players and how Lampard is building this spine of youth players, I think that was a temporary thing, because they obviously had their transfer ban. Because you see, Billy Gilmore isn't playing anymore, and Reece James isn't exactly a starter anyway. So I think Fikayo Tomori hasn't played.
Can't get a game, can you really?
Yeah, I think Chelsea aren't that sort of club which in the future will have this sort of idea of developing players either. Liverpool can. I think the way they plan to use Neco Williams I think is someone who can be that backup to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but they sort of prefer their own talents rather than signing them. City, of course, they are more into ready-made players who are ready to step into their first team right away. And I think in that case, United have become probably the most attractive destination in England, at least. But if you look at players like maybe Dani Olmo as well, Dani Olmo was with Dinamo Zagreb, and he could have easily moved to, say, Serie A or maybe the Premier League with Spurs who are looking at him. But he decided to move to RB Leipzig, and I think that's again down to because they find Germany a place to develop themselves, stay there for 2 years, get first team football, and then.
Sure. Yeah, I think he made the right choice. Bellingham's making the right choice. I think, and Haaland has as well. And yeah, I would agree with that. And in terms of Gomez, are you upset that he's gone? And do you think that he's going to be? a Pogba sort of what if sort of player?
No, I mean, one thing that I'll say about Angel Gomez is, if you look at the sheer size of Scott McTominay these days in terms of physicality, I mean, when McTominay was about 16 or 17, he wasn't close to the size that he is now. He was pretty close to the stature that Gomez is. I think he's not developed physically at all. You look at the players that United have had over the last few years playing in the academy. There was this period around the age of maybe 18 or 19 where they developed physically into they just buffed up and earned some muscles and all that stuff. Gomez hasn't really done that. I think Tahith Chong had those troubling knee injuries, but he still managed to get some muscles in and bulk up. But Angel Gomez had no real big injury, but he's still sort of. I don't think he's that physical specimen in the Premier League, and I think that's why Oli kind of used him more in the Europa League games and against, say, Rochdale. I think it was in the League Cup. He's not keen to use him in the Premier League for just that, because he's not done enough physically. And in terms of, I think United really wanted to keep him to make sure that he develops in that fashion, because I think back in 2017, I was really excited to see him make his debut coming on for Rooney and all that stuff. It was like it's probably written in the stars or something. But it now seems as if it's not like the world's about to end that Angel Gomez is leaving, because I think if you look at some top clubs across Europe, what clubs offer him the chance to maybe develop and potentially get first team for, or maybe again Germany. Apart from Germany, there's no real club there who can offer him first team football. Again, Barcelona, they call Barcelona the place for youngsters, but that was all a myth for the previous decade. It's that culture doesn't really exist now. I mean, their own young players are shunted out on loan on buyout clauses. They've done that for Marco Cucurella as well now. So I think if he can maybe go to the Netherlands and maybe develop at club like Ajax or Heerenveen or Feyenoord and all these clubs, I think that is the sort of development he probably needed at this point. We should have ideally loaned him out in January, like we're probably planning for Jimmy Garner. I think it's tough to say, because even Pogba developed physically when he was around the age of 18, 19. I think that's one reason why he was given his debut against Leeds in the Cup. But I don't really see that for Gomez, and I'm a bit disappointed, but I'm not surprised at all.
Absolutely, it's a phenomenal answer. And Kaus, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Your insight has been incredible, and we've spoken for over an hour and a half. I mean, we're aiming for an hour, but it's you've got some great insights, and I know that listeners are going to absolutely love it. So thanks very much for coming on, mate.
Thanks a lot, man. I really enjoyed it. I mean, that's what happens when you talk about transfer. There's so many things to cover and a lot of detail to talk about, but I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, and we'll be definitely getting you on again. And if you guys aren't following Kaus, I'll put his @ handle at the end of the video, and I'll do a little post on Twitter. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and let's hope for a big United win. Thank you. Take care.